welcome back to Cotta Verde. My name's Annette and I live here in South Buckinghamshire in the UK, which is equivalent to a Zone 8A. Today I'm digging up my Ranunculus. The reason I dig them is because we've got a heavy clay soil and also a lot of squirrels. And I've found that if I leave mine in the ground that they just get eaten, because those corms are just like caviar to squirrels and all the other little critters that are searching for food in the autumn and winter. It's not absolutely necessary to dig Ranunculus. It really does depend on your soil type and your climate, but it also depends upon how much bother you're getting from critters. Now we get loads of bother from the squirrels, and they'll just eat everything, and the mice. I think they eat the Ranunculus too. So I've lost my entire crop, all the corms, one winter because I sowed them in the autumn and I didn't protect them and they got eaten. So I've learnt my lesson. I don't leave mine in the ground. And actually, whilst digging dahlias is quite labour intensive, I don't find that digging my Ranunculus corms is that strenuous. It's really easy to dig them and the soil tends to fall off quite easily. So I store them through the winter, and then late winter I bring them out of storage, and I've done a few videos about pre-sprouting them and what I do to start my corms off and then how I plant them in the ground. So do check those out on my Ranunculus playlist. But what I'm doing today is I'm lifting them and then I'm putting them into storage, and I'm just going to show you what I do and how I go about that and how I dry them and what stage they need to be in order for me to be able to store them successfully until I'm ready to plant them again. I also find by lifting my Ranunculus that I'm freeing up some space in my beds for me to be able to plant other things like dahlias and rudbeckia and just things that go in the bed at this time of year. So one of the things I wanted to mention, because I've read about this and heard about this, but it's really important not to discount the really small corms that you dig up. Now I have all my Ranunculus just mixed up in like a whole jumble, and I don't separate them according to colour or type or anything, and I just plant them because all the colours sort of mingle with Ranunculus. They all sort of blend together really nicely. So when I plant them in my beds, I just think it looks nice to have a mixture. But what I have found is that they bloom at different times. So I found, you know, that the first ones to bloom are the pink ones, like the deep pink ones, and then after that I tend to get the paler colours and the dark blooms, and they are also, interestingly, the ones that I think have smaller corms. So if you save just the really big corms, you might end up with just the really dark pink ones. So don't discount the smaller corms. So I think that the colours that aren't predominantly, you know, deep pink, I think those Ranunculus produce smaller corms, and that's what I found in my experience anyway. So don't bin them just because they're small, because they're probably the ones that are going to give you the nice pale Ranunculus. I feel like I've gone like a really long roundabout way of trying to explain what I was trying to say there, but anyway, let's get on with digging some, and then I'm going to, you know, put them into storage. So I tend to tap off all the earth, and then I just take my secateurs and chop the greenery off, which is pretty much all dead. And then it's quite easy to see here that this is the corm that will grow from next year. These little dangly bits will probably just fall off in storage. They're just roots that aren't important, but the corm is the important bit. So I just gently bang off as much earth as I can, and that's all there is to it. And I chop it off. And compost, I always compost the you know, the greenery, the foliage. And to be honest with you, when this the soil dries in storage or as you're drying the corm, it'll probably all fall off anyway. You probably don't need to bang it. I just like to keep my compost in the ground. I mean, this one's just separated itself for me, and I can probably ease that one out too. Now you don't have to separate your corms. You can leave them as one big bundle, and I often do. I often don't bother separating them at all, so it's entirely your choice. I mean, eventually probably your corms will just come apart like that, or you'll decide that you don't want, you know, 5 or 6 corms stuck together. And I often find that it's much easier to separate my corms once they've dried, and I don't tend to separate them at this stage because I find that whilst the corms are all swollen still and haven't dried out, that they're much more stuck together, interlocked. Yeah, I find they're much more interlocked whilst they're still at this swollen stage. There's another one that's just separated of its own accord. So with the foliage, I just chop it up a bit before I put it on the compost. But I compost all of this. It's really good stuff for your compost. There's no need to get too precious about it. Now that I've dug all my corms up, I'm going to lay them out to dry, and I'm using a crate for this because that's just my preferred choice, because that way I can keep them from all the critters who might want to eat them, although they probably won't at this time of the year because there's plenty of food around. But the reason I use a crate is because then all the compost that's still stuck to them can fall through, and I just space them out in here and lay them out to dry. It's as simple as that. And I will leave them for as long as it takes for them to get crispy, and I leave them out in the sunshine but not in the rain. And you know, if you've got some that have got quite a lot of compost on, then you know, I might rinse it, but I'm not going to bother. I'm just going to leave it to dry. And if it's quite a big clump, I might decide to see whether I can split it, because that way it would dry faster. But I tend to find that the corms split more easily once they're shriveled. And when they're still, you know, really firm and full of moisture, they're not that easy to pull apart. So I'm just going to leave it to dry that way, and I'm literally just laying them all out like this here, not in any particular order, nothing, not any particular way up, but just laying them out to dry. And you know, if I had loads of time, all the time in the world, I might decide to clean them up a bit, but these stems are just going to crisp up and fall off, so I'm not bothered about the odd leaf or anything like that. I am trying to just make sure that they're all separate so that there's good airflow and they dry faster that way, and I don't have to leave them out for a month. It should just take a day or two depending on, you know, how warm the weather is, but it's going to be super hot this weekend, so definitely by Sunday I anticipate them all being completely dry. And like all good shows where we're showing how to do things, I have some that I prepared earlier. So these are some corms that I dug up last week, and you know, there's obviously quite a difference between the dry ones and the ones that are wet. So you can see how they dry. So they're all completely dry and the leaves have died off, and yeah, there's still some soil, but I could, you know, bang it off and clean them up if I wanted to. I don't tend to rinse them, and obviously that's something that I could do to rinse all the compost off, but that would just involve making them wet again when I'm actually trying to dry them. So I don't rinse them before I lay them out to dry, but that's something that could definitely be done if that's your desire. So now I'm just pulling off all the little hairy root bits. Those bits aren't important at all. What's important are these swollen bits here that look like octopus tentacles, a very small octopus obviously. So this is the corm. This is just dead stuff, last year's growth, and it's not important. And it's easy to see here that I've actually got 2 corms, and I could choose to split this if I want to. And as I was saying earlier, I find it easier to split the corms when they're at this stage, when they're dry, as opposed to when they're at this stage, when they're still really fat and really swollen. And hopefully you can see the difference between the one that's still swollen and the one that isn't. This one's dry as a bone, and this one's still got loads of moisture in it, and all the little tentacles are really swollen. Oh, I just broke that one off, but it doesn't matter. So I'm not going to split it when it's at this stage, but when it's at this stage, I find it easier to sort of wiggle and pull them apart. Oh, that didn't work. So it is possible, if you desire. I mean, sometimes it's not possible, but if I wanted to make 2 plants out of this one plant, I could just wiggle these and pull them apart. And it's taken me a few minutes to do that. Bear with me. It just depends how intertwined the little fingers of the corms are, how easy it is, but perseverance and wiggling will enable me to separate the 2 corms. So now I have 2 plants here instead of the 1, and it is not, I don't find it's necessary to do this. If I had maybe 5 corms stuck together, then I would definitely separate them. I think the plant would do better. Or if I really wanted to increase the stock of a particular variety, then I would split them. But quite often I just leave my corms stuck together. So at this stage, if I wanted to, I could clean them up by pulling off these little roots. It really isn't necessary. The only reason I might do it is that when I come to soak them at the beginning of next season, then there'll be sort of less debris and stuff in the bowl. But it really, I've never found it makes any difference whether I clean them up or not, whether they've got loads of soil on them when I put them into storage. As long as they're dry, and they really are dry, and you know, they've shriveled up, they're much, much smaller. These little fingers are so much smaller than these fingers here. So once they're dry, after about a week, put them into storage, and I'll just show you what I do there for that. When I put my corms into storage, I use a crate. Sometimes I have used a cardboard box, and that's absolutely fine, but what I would never use is like a plastic box with a lid, because I definitely don't want to seal them too much. I don't want to prevent airflow. I want to encourage airflow. I just want them to be able to breathe really whilst they're in storage for a few months. And I also use these little plastic bags here. They're like mesh bags, and they're definitely plastic, and I just I wash them and reuse them, and they're the same ones that I use to store my dahlias to keep the varieties separate. And I'm literally just going to put my corms into this bag, and I won't put too many into each bag. Maybe I'll put like half the crate into this bag, but I want them, as I said, to have room for good airflow. I mean, we don't particularly want green stuff going in the bag because that's still alive. So I'll just sort of maybe fill a bag like that, half full. It's really not important. I could probably put them all in one bag. I don't know why I don't. And then I just put that bag here on the bottom of this crate. And then I just fill another bag. That's all of them. Spread them out so there's good airflow, and then I just put that one in there too. And I will just fill crates with my corms. So I've obviously got the corms that I dug up today that still need to dry and will need to go in a crate too. Once they're in the crate, I have sometimes covered them with a layer of sawdust. I sometimes cover them with some crumpled up newspaper or something like that, but it really isn't necessary. I just like to maintain good airflow, and as I said, a cardboard box is fine. I mean, you could poke a hole in it, I suppose, if you wanted to. And then I store these in the garage, and the reason we choose our garage is because it doesn't get too hot in there in the summer, and it also doesn't freeze in the winter. So that's the best place that we found in our house to store the corms, and they seem to go through the winter really well in there. I've never used a shed, and the reason that I don't use the sheds behind me is because they can get really hot in the summer actually, and you know, especially, I mean, our roof on our sheds is tiled, but if your shed has got like a felt roof or something like that, then it could get really hot, and then your corms are going to dry out, they're going to bake, they'll cook, and then they won't make it through. So I would definitely recommend finding somewhere, a pantry would do if you don't mind keeping them in a pantry, but find somewhere that maintains a fairly consistent temperature, or at least doesn't get too hot or too cold. But that's it for today. I have finished digging up all my ranunculus and I've put them all into storage. I'm not sure why I'm giggling. I think just saying ranunculus too many times is quite difficult for me. But anyway, thank you so much for watching. If you've enjoyed this video, please do subscribe to my channel. Please hit the like button. It really helps me. I'd really appreciate it. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all next time. The reason I dig my ranunculus is my ranunculus. Very tongue twisty. I'm absolutely covered in earth. I'm completely covered in compost, because I think that the non-pink, non-bright pink colours, I don't even know what to call them. It's very windy today. I have no idea what my hair looks like.